Welcome back, everybody. If you're one of the 10 to 15 people that check into my channel from time to time looking for the cutting edge and next level fishing content, I apologize, this isn't one of those videos. I've been working on something a little different lately. There's more fishing videos to come. Fall's here, winter's coming, so I'm hoping to get some more stuff out there. But for now, I am actually working on building a Cedar Hot tub, just like the video description says. You can see in the background here, I've got all my vertical boards or staves cut to length, but before we get to those, I need to get to a floor for the hot tub. For that, I'm going to be using this 6" by 5/4 cedar decking. I've got all my deck boards cut down to 6-foot lengths, and I've got a couple 5-footers here for the outside of the circle. But the first thing I need to do is these boards come with the edges. You can see there, they're machined. They've got that rounded corner on them. So what I'm going to do is put these on the table saw and get a nice straight edge on both sides of the board so that when they come together, they get a little bit tighter seal. You could do a tongue and groove if that's what you wanted to do, but you need a few more boards for that, just because you get a little bit more overlap rather than just putting, the 1 inch next to each other. So, and this method gives you a little bit more forgiveness if your boards aren't perfectly straight. So, before I get into that, I just want to make mention, and I'll mention it probably a few times throughout the video, that if you're going to be building a Cedar hot tub, you want the straightest, knot-free boards you can find. As you go, the straighter the boards are, obviously, and the more knot-free they are, the better. Knots aren't as big a deal during basically the building process, but once you start filling your tub up with water, those knots create rock points. So if you eliminate the knots off the go, you won't have issues down the road. So for now, I'm just going to jump into it. I'm going to start ripping the edges off of these boards, and we're going to start with the floor. So here we go. Alright, so we've got that done. It didn't take too long, about half hour. But as you can see, all these boards now have nice square edges, so they're going to make a lot nicer, tighter joints. So I paused after making the first cut on the first board. I switched out and put a little bit better blade on my saw. But I think we're ready to start throwing the floor together here. As you watch this video, keep something in mind. I am not a professional woodworker by any stretch of the imagination. As a matter of fact, I would put myself more towards the beginner's end of the spectrum. I built a table once and an Adirondack chair. Other than that, like I said, just a beginner. So if you see something in the video or hear me say something and makes you stop and go, what's this guy talking about? Just keep that in mind. If you have a suggestion for me, I'd love to hear it, something that you think may make this better or easier. By all means, drop me a comment. But all right, let's start putting this floor together. All right, so we've got all our boards cut down. The next step is to lay out our floor here. As you can see, we've got them kind of laid out. One of the things I wanted to consider is a few of these boards have a couple blemishes in the end, like this one you can see. It's got some cracking here on the end. So I'm laying that towards one end or the other because this is going to be a round hot tub, and ultimately when I come through, I'll be able to cut that blemish off and it'll be scrap. So as you lay these floorboards out, take an extra minute, take a good look at your boards, get one last inspection on them, and move boards that you don't want. If there's blemishes or things that could potentially be cut out, now's the time to get rid of them so they don't become a rot spot later. As I look at this, I may switch this board around. I don't know if I want. That shouldn't be too bad. So once we get these done, or now that I got it laid out, I assembled earlier what's going to be the runners for the hot tub. I've got 4 runners, a couple of 5-foot runners that are going to go in the middle here, like that.
and a couple of 6 4-foot runners that are gonna go on the outside. So those are gonna create our runners. So all I'm gonna do now is, this is the only place where I'm gonna use any screws or any hardware. I'm gonna lay these out. What I'm gonna do is screw a couple of these down, or basically get this set where I want it, screw a couple down, and then if there's any gaps like this one here, I'm actually going to take a clamp or a ratchet strap and clamp them together and take that gap out of there, and then screw the next board down, and just repeat that process till I get all my floorboards screwed down. Well, there you have it. Had the camera running and didn't realize that the battery had died, so but I got all my runners onto the floor here. I was just using a ratchet strap here to take some of the high spots out, or excuse me, take some of the gaps out, but there we have it. So just gonna starting to get some weight. There you go. There you have it. There is the hot tub floor assembled. So now my next step's going to be putting a circle on there. But like I said earlier, I don't use a tongue and groove design. That would maybe make things a little tighter. But you know, as these boards, one of the main reasons that you use cedar is because it has natural tannins in the wood that repel the water, but it also it swells considerably compared to other woods. So as these boards get wet and absorb the water, the tannins in the wood are going to keep them from rotting, but they're also going to expand. So any gaps that would be in there are just going to get tighter and tighter. And the tubs I built in the past with this method of just ripping them straight, I've never had any issues with the floor leaking. So there you have it. I am out of time for today, so I'm going to set this aside and come back a little later, and should be fairly quick here in the video. All right, we've got our floor, but now it's time to make a circle out of it. So what I've done is, coincidentally, this one is just so happens to be square. 72 inches by 72 inches, obviously minus the little cutouts in the corner, but that's going to get rounded off as we make it a circle out of it. So what I've done, obviously 72 divided by 2 is 36, so I've measured that, and I've got a little mark here. I found the middle. I've got a little mark right there in the middle, and I've got myself board here. That hole there to that hole there is 36 inches, so I'm going to put just a little temporary screw or a nail through that hole. Got my pencil here. I'm gonna sharpen up so that I can tack that down in the middle and sharpen my pencil, and I'm gonna basically just scribe a circle on this, scribe a circle around here, and then I'm gonna take my jigsaw and cut it out. So that's our next step, to make a circle out of this. So let's get that done now. All right, there we have it. I'm just going to take a sanding block here and clean a little bit of these edges up. Got a little rough, but there you go. Starting to take Well, I just finished what I would consider personally to be the most tedious and time-consuming portion of the hot tub build, and that is routering all the vertical boards or staves. You can see they're all, I mean, you've got a router each side, the convex and the concave side here. I've got a couple of my bits set aside here. Pretty large bits because I'm working with 2x4 dimensional lumber, and so excuse me, got a little sawdust in my throat here. It's been routering for the last 5 hours or so. Finally got them all done. Couple things to consider when you're doing this. This concave side, you don't want to router that too deep, otherwise these edges, as the boards come together, will hit here. Remember that you're making a circle, so they're not perfectly straight on. They create a curve. So if you router these too deep, you're going to end up creating some issues for yourself. So that router setup is a major portion of it. Another little tip I've got is while you're doing the routering, you're going to end up with just mountains of sawdust. As you can see, I got sawdust all over. I actually I take about a 5-gallon bucket full of that and set it aside. You can see right now I've been throwing it in this, I've been throwing it in that garbage can. It's about half full, but I'm going to save about 5 gallons of that, and that'll come in handy after you get your tub set up and you go to fill it up the first time. That sawdust, if you have any major leaks before that wood swells up and locks those together, what you'll end up doing is putting a little bit of that sawdust, just rubbing it into the leak, and it'll just shut that leak right off. So the water pressure will push that sawdust in, and that way you're not, having to use something else to try to stop leaks while that wood can swell. So it's just the wood itself. So throw a little bit of sawdust aside, and right now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to router a groove in each one of these boards so that they can be put onto the floor that we've already built and set aside. So I'm going to get to that, and after that, the next step will be putting these onto the tub itself, and it should start coming together and looking like a hot tub here. All right, well, we're ready to start putting the staves onto our baseboard here, or onto our floor. One thing that I'm going to do quick before I do that I almost forgot is I'm going to put this little elbow in there for my drain. This is the first time I'm going to put a ball valve in so I can drain it from the outside of the tub. In the first view I made, I just had a plug in the floor. You pull the plug in and it runs out the bottom out of a hole. But I bought this 1-inch elbow. I wanted to make sure I drilled a little practice hole in this just scrap piece of wood here, just to make sure that the dimensions are true, that it actually is 1 inch, and it's pretty close. So I'm just going to drill a 1-inch hole into the bottom side of this floor and screw this elbow in there like that, so that when the time comes I can put my hose and ball valve on there. Again, this is the first time I'm trying that. I don't know how well it's going to work, but we'll find out. Well, I got about a quarter of the way through getting my staves on and these ratchet straps for my temporary banding on the tub before my battery died, and rather than stop and wait for my batteries to charge back up, because it was my last charged battery, I just finished the job. But basically, you can tell I finished putting all the staves on the tub, and then I just used a couple ratchet straps, one down at the bottom along the floor line and one down at the top as temporary banding. When I put the top one on, what I'll do is put a couple blocks in it here around the tub spaced out, because my next step is building my bands. You can buy like commercial built bands online, anywhere from 50 to 150 bucks a piece, depending on what you want. I just go to the hardware store and I can put all three together for about the same price as one. I think I got everything I needed for these bands for $50 at the local big box store. I just buy, this is 2-ton cable, the type that you would use for like a garage door or a bolt lift or something like that. I buy it in 20-foot lengths, is the perfect length for a 6-foot tub. Then I just get a couple of these cable ties for each end and a turnbuckle in the middle. What I'll do is start by putting one of my ends together like this one here. And then those pieces of blocking that I put behind my ratchet strap, I use as a little shelf. I just make sure that they're all set the same distance down from the top. And then I stretch my band around, set my band around on top of those little shelves, spread my turnbuckle out and put my other end. And put my other end together here. Once this end is put together, if I was ready, I could move this band where I want it. I normally put one here around the floor, one at the center line, and one about 4 or 5 inches down from the top. Once I've got this band set,
I cut this end off, tighten down my turnbuckle, and from there, I'm basically ready for water. And depending on your heat source, you know, this one's we're gonna have an internal heater, so we're gonna put our heater in here, a bench, and that's our next step. So there we go. Here comes the heater. Well, here we have it. The hot tub is assembled and it's reached its final resting place. Woo! You can tell it's getting warm, steam coming off the water. Current air temperature we're at today is 3 below, but we got a roaring fire going here in the stove. I didn't go much into the stove. I have a friend who is a phenomenal fabricator with aluminum and metal, so he built me a submersible stove that sits down in the water here. It's 30 inches deep, 14 inches wide, and 22 inches across. It's got a couple baffles in there, and we pumped water out of the lake here that went into the tub at 35 degrees, and it's warming up fast. So you know, one other thing I'll say about these tubs is this one in particular, the wood was incredibly dry and it took a long time for it to swell tight, but it got there. These tubs take an incredible amount of time to swell up sometimes, so if you build one, don't get frustrated because you don't think it's holding water. You know, just give it time. You know, put a sprinkler in there. And I mentioned that sawdust earlier, scraping some of that sawdust together. What you do with that, and I didn't do a video on it, and I apologize because it's so cold out here, but you take that sawdust, grab a handful, and you run it down the seams, and that water pressure will push that sawdust into that seam and act like a caulk until the tub swells. But as you can see, she's swelled up, she's holding water, and I'm thinking in a couple hours here, we're gonna have her heated up and go for a dip. So I'm sure I left some stuff out. If you have questions or curious about some of the things as far as the setup goes, it was just so cold that the cameras didn't want to agree while we were setting up and filling it. You know, shoot me a message and I'll get back to you. Cheers.